So good morning. Good morning, Ignite. Yay. Yeah, this is insane. For me, it's a big day. It's my first time at Ignite, and so many people have made it to my session. My parents will never ever believe me that you guys came to my session, so thanks a lot already. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. Today, we'll talk about best practices to secure Windows 10 with already included features. We've heard a lot about being a BFF at the keynote. So if you want to be my new BFF, this is where you can find me on the internet. My name is Alexander. I'm a senior consultant at the consulting company based in Cologne. I do a lot and for a long time with Workplace of the Future. And actually, I think that's why I'm staying here today. There's just one thing that I want to point out. This is the Geekzeugs part. That's a German word for, yeah, it's a German name for everything that has to do something with what we are actually doing and loving. Eric, the fellow who clapped his hands actually, obviously he and myself will be doing a podcast tomorrow. So if you're interested, join us at the podcast studio. So who of you guys, we will talk about a lot about securing Windows 10 today, and who of you guys is responsible for the security of the clients in his environment? Can you show me your hands? All right, wow, that's a lot. And who of you guys feel safe by having a firewall? No? No one? Okay. But this is actually something that I, as a consultant, face very often, right? If I go to customer sites, they are like, hey, Alex, we want to go from Windows 7 to 10. And the thing is, we want to do that as easy and quickly as possible. And by the way, if we can block or if you can enable that security thing, that would be cool, right? So this is what I'm seeing a lot these days. And the whole session will be the threat landscape that we are facing as IT consultants or as IT guys. So this is something that we'll take a short look in. And then we'll have a look on the latest and greatest mitigation features in Windows 10. We'll have a very hard focus on the newly introduced features that come from the Windows Defender framework or the Windows Defender suite. And then we'll talk about the no-brainers to secure Windows 10, at least from my point of view. Yeah, and one thing that I see a lot when a customer engages me, that the discussion is always about tools. Like I said previously, I come to customer sites and they say, hey, Alex, we want to do a migration. I said that already. But Microsoft has lowered their prices for Defender. Can we use that Defender thing? And I'm like, yeah, you can use that. All right, that's a good thing to hear because, we want to have a look on, we have McAfee or any other product in place, and we want to have a look on the Defender thing. Can we compare that one-on-one? And I'm like, guys, that's a completely wrong thing. That's a completely wrong start point. So, I want to give you the message that if your discussion in your environment is about tools, think about that whole landscapes thing. And that's one thing that I want to highlight here is because that threat landscape that we're facing today is so diverse, there cannot be one tool or one feature or one plugin or something like that that we just need to enable and then we're secure, right? So what we're seeing these days is a lot of phishing. Phishing is actually one of the most common scenarios or the most common attack scenarios that we are facing these days. Like for example, your employees or your customers get an email where there's a link inside which says, hey, there's some absolutely necessary information you need to download. Please click on that link, download that file, and then you're good to go, right? And ransomware is another big thing. We in Europe had WannaCry, or NotPetya. And one thing about the threat landscape is not all of these attack scenarios come by their own. Very often they are combined, like WannaCry or NotPetya. They were combined as a ransomware with a worm, right? Because it was not just the ransomware that made us so much trouble, it was more the worms that did their job, that tried to get their code on other clients. And this is something that we are facing very, very hard. Spyware is another big thing. Keyloggers, I think keyloggers are not that current anymore. We see them, but the attack scenario or the attack behavior has decreased. Worms, like I said previously, and I mean, wow, how many things have you seen at Ignite about compromised accounts or how to protect compromised accounts? I mean, accounts, the account of a user is the central thing in terms of security in the future. At least it's a central thing in many customer sites these days, but I think it will get even harder in the future. And I mean, what we've seen is with Azure ATP, Microsoft has even made a product to get the information or to detect if an account has been compromised, right? So this is something that is really hard to detect, and if an attacker has an account, he's already good to go, whatever he want to do. So you might ask, Alex, how to secure clients then? And like I said already, we'll have a look on the Windows Defender framework, but there's something that I see very common when security guys introduce, security, hey, now I can see you. When security guys say, hey, I'm a consultant and I want to show you how you can secure your environment, and you have just, like I said previously, you just need to get this tool and combine it with that, and then you're secure. And what I ask my customers then is, do you know what you want to secure? I mean, where is your data that you want to secure? And this is a pretty tough question though, because I mean, we are IT admins and we all know our things, our stuff, our solutions, but sometimes, I mean, it's even my thing. I mean, sometimes we don't see where the most valuable information or the most valuable data in an environment is. We don't have a clue, right? Because sometimes I mean, even in industrial companies, we do not. It's so big that we do not have any insights on where is that data stored and who has the most important data to protect, right? So we do not have an idea of the data. And the other thing is, and this is something that I teach to my colleagues very often, we do not have a real idea of how attackers would find or would go their way through our environment, right? So we do not have something or an idea of the whole red teaming thing. And what we're actually going to do today is, I'm going to show you some attack scenarios. We will work a little bit with Kali Linux. I'm going to create a payload, and we will share a payload and compromise a Windows 10 client. So in every step that we'll take, I will try to give you an idea of how you could have protected or you could have avoided this scenario to happen. I hope that works for you. And I mean, this is my first Ignite. I hope it's not the last one, because I mean, I breached a Windows 10 client, so hopefully, yeah, give me good feedback. Maybe that helps. All right, so two things you got to know before we start up, okay? One thing is, what is an exploit? An exploit is a computer code that takes advantage of a vulnerability which is in a software system, right? Okay, this is very important to know. So the vulnerability is already there, and the exploit itself is the way to get into that client, okay? And the payload then is the thing that we run or execute to get our things done, whatever we want to do, okay? So with these two things, this is the scenario that we're going to do today. We are the attacker that is going to use an exploit, which will then download a payload, which does the things like, you will see that later, and then we have our compromised client. And what common scenarios to share the payload, I just want to highlight all three of them. We will have a look at the fake hyperlink and the JPEG file. the so-called JPEG file, because I mean, everybody of you guys, I'm sure, has an idea of how code can be executed as a, like for example, a PowerPoint macro, something, a Word, or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure you guys all have an idea of how that could look like. So the fake hyperlink, even for me, I mean, I spoke at a conference in Berlin about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then a few days on Twitter, I saw on one of my fellow speaker guys sharing a link which said, hey, many people have asked me where my slide deck is, and I know that the event will share the slide deck in a couple of days, but if you want to have my slide deck now, here's the link. And I hit it on the link and was like, yeah, I got the file. And what then happened is the file got downloaded on my client, and I mean, actually, then when it had downloaded, I was like, hey, I shouldn't have done that. And this is something, I mean, even at Ignite, we see that a lot, that people share hyperlinks and we all click on them like freaking, yeah, give me the information, right? So, okay. We'll have a look at that. I think because that is so small, I will do that full screen. Hold on. That works better, right? Whoop. All right. So this is Kali Linux, and we are going to open up a terminal, and then we are going to create that payload. And the thing that I want to highlight here, or that I want to show you, is how easy it is to create a payload and to spread that payload through the whole environment. What we're going to do here is we'll use a reverse TCP payload. That means as soon as somebody has clicked on that payload, it will establish a connection, a TCP connection to our host. Our host is the Kali Linux machine we are working on right here. So I'll have to set up the host IP address. That's what you've seen previously. We'll tell the payload to use port 444, and we'll create an exe file on the so-called desktop, or on desktop, which will be called windowspatch.exe. Done. Now we're going to launch the Metapreter session and configure Metapreter to listen on that point and that port, because I mean, if not, it would have accepted every connection. And this is something that I want to highlight too. This is Metasploit. This is an open source software which everybody of you can download. And one thing that I want to show you guys is the thing in the red box. There are 1,673 exploits which can be used very easily. They are not exploits for, not all exploits are for Windows 10. Oh, again. Hi, guys. Not all exploits are for Windows 10. Even though they are not for Windows operating systems, some of them are for Linux, and others are for Mac. And there are 489 payloads that can run in addition to that exploit, right? As you know, exploit is the vulnerability in the software, and the payload is the thing that executes on the client. So this is very important to know. So we'll go ahead. And because the time is running quickly, maybe I will make that a little bit quicker. So we will set a payload that it will use a reverse TCP connection. We haven't configured any host options yet. That's what we're going to do now. The IP address and the port. And we set exploit, and now it's listening, okay? So this is the only thing that we have to do on the host system. And now we're going to share that payload as a fake hyperlink. Again, I'm going to, there you go, going to zoom that one out. We've already created that Windows patch.exe, and what we're going to do now is we'll upload that exe file to any upload or sharing platform of your choice. And because nobody will click on uploaded files IO, we will use that link, go to the Google shortener, and shorten that previously created file link with the Google shortener, and now we got a serious Google link, and everybody trusts Google, right? So this is the thing that we are going to use. So this is one scenario. And now we come to one of the things that I want to, I mean, this is at least the content of my session, to talk about the security functionalities. I mean, you have to get an idea of how you can breach the system, but you want to know how you can protect it. Who of you guys uses smart screen or even no smart screen? See, this is not many. In Germany, that's not even more, because smart screen works a little bit with the cloud, and everybody's so scared about the cloud. If I say cloud in any customers' workshops, they're like, cloud. He said cloud. Yeah, so what we're going to do now is, and I think there are some consultants in here, and I encourage you to use that on your own. What you can do with a Windows 10 client is, and this is the thing that we are going to do first, is to enable Smart Screen in the new Windows Defender Security Center, okay? Smart Screen works in addition with that, the best. And what you guys can do is you can work with the Windows Defender test ground. What you can do here is you can create a new file which contains a virus. And this file has a new hash value. And when you download that file on one client, and this is what we're doing now, we get the information, hey, this is not a commonly downloaded software. And when we say, okay, launch it anyway, or start it anyway, at this point, Smart Screen kicks in. You can get Smart Screen in different ways, with full cloud, with not so much cloud, and with a very less cloud. This is the information where Smart Screen says, hey, this is a file that has not a trusted publisher, so maybe this is a file that could harm your computer. And see, I said, okay, run it anyway, and then the virus did whatever he had to do, and Windows Defender Antivirus kicks in and says, hey, I found some threads, I've cleaned them, they're not an issue anymore. If you go to another client now, the second client, and run that exact same file that we did previously, you can identify that on the hash value. I'm still allowed to click on the file to download a file, but as soon as Smart Screen has done his job, it will clear the file and do not allow the user or your employee to, or your customer to run that file. And that is a pretty good thing to have, because this is, I mean, Microsoft speaks about this scenario or this feature as block at first sight. And this was all done within 150 seconds. That's pretty good, what I think. So Smart Screen is one thing, and the whole scenario works in that way. The attacker creates that malware, shares it with the customer, with his victim. He clicks on that file. The attacker can do whatever he wants. Windows Defender Antivirus kicks in and says, hey, this is a virus, sends that information to the Windows Defender Cloud Protection Center, and as soon as another client who has the Smart Screen functionality enabled tries to click on that exe file, Smart Screen asks the Windows Defender Cloud Protection Service, hey, do you got any information in terms of this file? And the Smart Screen service says, yes, that's a virus, don't open it, and you're protected. Another thing that we've heard a lot about is Windows Defender Application Guard. I've got another demo for you guys. I've prepared this demo with build 16257, which is a Windows Insider build. As soon as we got 1709, we're good to go. I think some of you have heard that 8 gig RAM is the recommended or the recommendation of Microsoft. If you ask me, it doesn't make sense to have Application Guard on a client with lower RAM because it will be very slow. And as soon as you enable that feature, so it's a feature in with Windows 10, you have the possibility to say in Edge, open a new Application Guard window. And what happens is, and this is something that I really like at Application Guard, the whole scenario or the whole functionality works with whitelisting. That means I can whitelist a page like this wonderful page, which is called itpirate.com or en.itpirate.eu. And as soon as I open a page which is not whitelisted, the Windows Defender Application Guard will start up, will create that container, and will show that page in that recently created container. And I can configure and I can select what information I want to have in the Application Guard window and out of the Application Guard window. And that is even possible to configure that more in detail with System Center Configuration Manager. The 1708 version of Config Manager has the configuration support for Application Guard in there, so you can configure, do you want clipboarding in the session or do you want it coming out of the session? Do you want to print or not? The bottleneck, the bottleneck of Application Guard in terms of what my experiences are is performance, right? So, we all face users each day, and as soon as something takes longer than they expected or they are used to that, they will say, hey, I don't want this Application Guard Edge thing, right? So this is something that for sure Microsoft can do a little bit more to get a better performance, but there are already some functionalities and features where you can allocate the RAM which was created or which was initiated with the first session of Application Guard, and you can keep it although the user has closed the Application Guard window. So that's a good thing to have. So even if the user closes that Application Guard window, the RAM will stay allocated, and within the next start of Edge, it will be way better in terms of the performance for the user to launch that window. And the whitelisting thing, I think the whitelisting thing is a really good thing to have. That you can say, okay, these are the pages that we as an environment trust. These are the pages that I want to have whitelisted, so the user can browse them with the regular Edge application. And as soon as he leaves that perimeter, he cannot go ahead with Edge. Okay. And the thing, just to point that out, the thing about when he closes that container, everything will be gone, is the thing that I at least want for my parents, and you guys maybe want for your customers, right? So they can click on fancy on every link and can download whatever file they want, and it cannot interact in any way with the operating system. So I think that's a really good thing to have. Like I said previously, you can already configure Application Guard. Some of the policies came with 1703. We will have more policies coming up with 1709. These are the most common policies that you can configure with through Active Directory, like for example the clipboard settings, print settings, and the whitelisting, which can be done on the next page through the network isolation policy. This is not so comfortable, I admit that, because you have to list every URL that you want to trust. But Microsoft is working on that. They heard you, and they are working on a more comfortable way to manage these URL. If you have a look at our scenario, and I just want to show you a tougher scenario for Application Guard. If you have a look at that scenario we had previously, where we downloaded that malicious file on our computer, and the scenario was about Smart Screen. When we do this with Application Guard, we see that there's an orange frame on top of the application. This is one identifier for an application guarded window, and there's another shield on the very bottom of the Explorer file in the tray bar, or in the taskbar. And if I want to launch that application, it says this app can't run in Windows Defender Application Guard because the administrator has declined or has prevented you from running this file. So that's a really good thing. Where am I? Where's my mouse? Okay, so next demo. I said previously we are going to share a file which looks like a fake JPEG file. And what we see a lot is that users run JPEG files because they get an email which says, hey, this is one of the sweetest animals I've ever seen. You have to have a look on that. So our scenario will be called Sweetest Animal of 2017. We'll create a zip archive where we say as soon as the user clicks on that archive or on that zip file, you have to run the payload first and then open up the JPEG file. We want this to run in hidden mode. And there's one thing that we have to do, and this is the thing that we do not want to have this zip file look like a zip file. So what we're going to do now is we will make the appearance of the file look like the JPEG with that icon file. There you go. So what we're having here is that malicious file or that zip file which contains our payload and the JPEG file. And what you've seen just right before I've closed that video was the file extension. So the file extension is another recommendation. I don't know where Microsoft hasn't by default configured Windows to show file extensions, because this is so important, right? Even myself, I click on files. If the file extension is not shown, I click on files and then I figure out what it does. Even on my client. So that's a pretty easy one, but a very important one. So when we run that payload on one client, there's another thing that kicks in. UAC is one thing that is discussed very often, but I think it at least gives the information to the user that this is an exe file and not a JPEG file that he's going to open. So UAC is not a security feature by default, but to have a level of UAC in place or in your configuration of Windows is, in my opinion, one thing that I completely recommend. So think about that, because I know that everybody of us admins has, when UAC was first launched, everybody's like, what's that nasty thing? What's that annoying thing? And we have disabled it, right? But in terms of protecting our users, it's a good thing to have, because it at least shows a pop-up which says, hey, you're going to execute an exe file. You don't want that. And especially when your users work in bring your own device scenarios, where you are able to enforce at least some policies, but not, protect everything that you want to do, because the computer is owned by the user. So UAC is one thing that I want to recommend too. Windows Defender Device Guard is another thing that we already got. I think it was 15.07, so very early functionality, or very early feature of Windows 10. We get it in 2 different scenarios. And what I see is that many of my customers use Device Guard only in the kernel mode. And within the kernel mode, you can allow only signed drivers to run before the operating system is ready to go with your login and this and that. You can configure Device Guard through Configuration Manager with 2 different policies, audit policy and the enforcement policy. The audit policy does only collect information, does only collect applications that the users run on their computers, and the enforcement policy does the whole thing of the protection or the execution prevention. So only applications, exe files that are within that enforcement policy can be run by the user. And Config Manager here can work as a trusted installer. So what you can do is you can say, or you can define that every application, and that was the bottleneck of Device Guard previously when we didn't have this functionality, you can say every application that comes, or that every update or whatever you choose that comes from Configuration Manager is trusted and does not need new code integrity policy, because that was the bottleneck of configuration of Device Guard previously. I said we have 2 different scenarios. One was the kernel mode and one was the user mode. The user mode then would kick in when the operating system is ready to go, right? Because when the user is able to log in, then Device Guard would kick in and would say, hey, only the applications can run that are within that enforcement policy. And that is pretty tough, though, because we at least have had one scenario each month where we had to configure or reconfigure that code integrity policy. And that was Windows Update. What I see pretty common too is that our customers use Device Guard in a scenario where they use the kernel mode code integrity for the launch of the operating system, and then they go ahead with the app locker feature. So they use the kernel mode of Device Guard for the whole security before the operating system is fully there, and then they go ahead with app locker and choose which application, which app is allowed to run and which not. So that's a good thing. If you haven't heard about that, think about that. I think this will work in the PowerPoint way. You remember the user has clicked on that payload file, and what we see as one of the Kali Linux users is then that a connection kicks in. We can switch to that session, and then we could do our stuff. What we are doing here is we use Meterpreter to get some sysinfo. We get information, what operating system is it, which user is logged on, is it a domain user or is it a workgroup user, are there any local admins? And what we are going to do now is we will create a new user, a new admin, a local admin, which is called Ignite, with a super secure password. and we add it to the local administrators group. So that client is compromised. We've we did that creation of that user in a shell. What you've seen is that we started from C exclude. C exclude is the file that the payload was executed in. And what we can do now is we can go back to Meterpreter and use functionalities like record microphone. You got a failure because, or we got a failure because this was a virtual machine that we were seeing. But if it's a physical machine, we can do things like record the microphone or start a webcam stream or something like that. So that is pretty scary. But everything, I mean, what I want to show you with this scenario is just how easy it is to compromise in client and give you an idea of how you are able to protect all your environment. And one thing that was introduced with Windows Defender 1709 was the Windows Defender exploit guard. There are so many functionalities, because it was coming out of AMAT, there are so many functionalities where you can harden your client with exploit guard. And one thing that I want to highlight here is that a functionality that is pretty comparable to that whole device guard functionality. What you can do is with exploit guard is you can say, hey, I don't want an application to write in like C user documents folder. Or what you can do, I think I haven't gotten why some enterprises do that, but there are some enterprises out there which create their own fonts. And that was a pretty tough thing for us admins to protect untrusted fonts previously, right? With the exploit guard, you have a functionality, you have a way to protect or to just disallow untrusted fonts. And the same with pictures, which are included in a document or in PDF, like as a remote graphic or graphics with a lower bit rate. You can protect them. So that's pretty cool. There are very less demos out there. I've got one with me. Because of the time, I won't show that demo. But if you're interested, just let me know. Come to me after my session, and we'll go in there a little bit deeper. There are some Windows 10 no-brainers left that I want to highlight. This is my recommendation. This is my experience. So there are some scenarios where they are not completely adoptable, but in most common scenarios, I think you can adopt them. One thing is stay current. I mean, Microsoft has done a lot, and there's a lot of discussion around Windows 10. But one thing that we can see as security analysts is that the appearance of exploits and the appearance of vulnerabilities within an operating system has decreased within the last years. And this is because of the whole thing around Windows 10 or Windows servicing. Because Microsoft, like they said that previously, as soon as an operating system is out, Microsoft tries to patch very tough on that operating system unless it's ready for the business, for the broad deployment. And this affects in a lower rate of vulnerabilities within an operating system. So that's one thing, stay current. Another thing is BitLocker. I mean, this is a Microsoft conference, and BitLocker is the thing that I should highlight here, right? But no matter which drive encryption you use, from my point of view, I don't care, but have a drive encryption application or a drive encryption scenario in place in your environment, because this is so important. You don't want to be that guy who got blamed after the CEO has lost, or the device or the notebook of the CEO has been stolen, and all the data can be found out there in the World Wide Web. And what you can see here is that even BitLocker is within Azure, within the Intune portal of Azure that they created in a new, very cool way. And you can do the whole management, like in modern management scenarios, with Intune in Azure. So that's pretty cool. And there's another thing that I want to highlight, another functionality and feature we got with Windows 10 15.07, which is Credential Guard. The LSA store, which has or keeps the NTLM or the hashes of the passwords that were created, was the #1 attack scenario, or the #1 attack thing that attackers had a look on previously. And what Microsoft did with Credential Guard was they created an LSA ISO. So they didn't isolate the LSA store, they isolated or they created another ISO store, a part of that, and then the domain credentials, the NTLM hashes or all hashes of the domain credentials will be stored within that LSA ISO. So that's a good thing, because only the bits and bytes that really need to interact with that ISO store can interact with it, and not like a Mimikatz. We've all seen that Mimikatz demo where the NTLM hash or the Kerberos ticket or something like that gets stolen. And the Credential Guard does a lot of things to protect them. So we've seen all these security functionalities in modern devices. Microsoft has done a lot in terms of all the different things like device protection, threat resistance, identity protection. You all know that. And there's only one thing that I want to highlight, and that is educate your users. I mean, we all have to do that, and I think that's the toughest thing to do, to educate your users. But they are the ones who click on the links. They are the one that executes their files. And I know it's hard, it's tough, but I think in the very end, that's the thing you have to do. I'm open for any questions. We got another 4 minutes left. So if you got any questions, please raise your hand. And if not, please evaluate my session, and thanks for coming.